Mishcon Academy Digital Sessions.
Welcome to Dispute Resolution in the Metaverse. I'm Miles Geffin, and I'm a legal director in the Insights team at Mishcon de Reya. As many of you will know, Mishcon is very active in the law tech space, both through our incubator, MDR Lab, and also through the work that we do with our clients and intermediaries in the law tech space. The Metaverse offers a blank sheet of paper when it comes to regulating commercial activity there. And what's happening in the Metaverse isn't likely to stay there. So what's just as interesting about how disputes might be resolved in the Metaverse is seeing what learnings can be exported from the Metaverse into the real world to revolutionize traditional legal services delivery and also practices and processes. As you'll see, we have a really impressive array of discussion leaders, and the event is going to be moderated by Sophie. She's a dual qualified solicitor and advocate and a full-time arbitrator. She has both a civil and common law background. And earlier this year, Sophie co-founded ArbTech. As you all know, it's a global online community driving cross-disciplinary dialogue on technology, dispute resolution, and the future of justice.
Miles, thank you so much. At ArbTech, we have been talking about the Metaverse a great deal. And we wondered, because we talk about Web3 economy, there are numbers, as usual, with the hyperbole of this field, there are numbers in the trillions and with loads of zeros added that talk about a potential that is extraordinary. The great thing about the Metaverse, as opposed to the social media that we know at the moment, is that it allows economies to flourish between participants, as opposed to, for example, in the gaming business, which are very centralized and where players are not encouraged and sometimes cannot at all transact between each other. Of course, whoever talks about economies emerging talks about transactions and talks about disputes. The very interesting thing that one finds when reading the plethora of information online about the Metaverse is that very little is said about disputes. A lot is being said about decentralization. A lot is being said about self-sovereign identity. A lot is being said about community governance. What does that mean for disputes, which are classically centralized into courts, and in the case of international arbitration, a little bit more decentralized in that you can have an ad hoc system of arbitration, but still at the same time we very much congregate around understood processes, understood rules, and where arbitrators are not is not peer-to-peer justice, it is a different thing. I'm privileged to be moderating this panel, which really they are discussion leaders. Each of them has chosen one of the topics to which you have provided your feedback when you registered, for which many, many thanks. We have values, we have structures, we have actors, we have due process, and we have enforcement. So I will move on then with our theme of values. And I just wanted to ask Alessandro, I mean, the immediacy and the fact that the Metaverse deals with people who are anonymized or avatars. I mean, how does that affect the values that underpin dispute resolution?
I think that we should remember that what is going to happen in the next few years is always something that regards a problem of coordination. So the entire set of this technology is going to be redrafting rules of coordinating, let's say, organizations or communities or groups of peoples. Somehow, maybe, the same, structure of civilizations or societies maybe could evolve in something different. In general, when we discuss the topic of dispute resolution, we are discussing a problem of coordination between individuals, between entities, between businesses. And this problem so far has been solved with essentially third parties helping, supporting in defining, composing a controversy between two individuals or businesses and so far and so on. The new landscape will redefine how the coordination between individuals will operate. And this redefinition for sure should increase at least the transparency of the relationships. If we think about, in strict terms about the blockchain technology, for sure the auditability of most of the events or all the events could be, could play an important role. this new, the Web3, it's going to reorganize communities according to, set of economic incentives that should produce better results, even when the parties don't know each other. They need to trust a specific architecture that is executed by smart contracts that every one of us can, go and check. And that architecture produces a series of economic incentives that should guide the participants to that coordination of events or organization. And I will move the trust from a single person to the entire set of rules. So in this context, it seems to me pretty reasonable to assume that the dispute resolution service or concept that this new economy would like to have needs to follow similar principles. Why? Because I don't want anymore to trust a single individual because someone told, hey, that specific individual is going to be expert and that's it. But probably I want to trust a different system where I can check and verify by myself how, for example, the decision maker is appointed. I think that we will assist to a kind of pivot of the so-called concept of dispute resolution in something a bit different that somehow maybe one day won't be, in certain cases at least, defined even as dispute resolution. Maybe will be technically just an oracle or a so-called human oracle that will intervene and will provide interpretations or will assist the parties before maybe the so-called disputes arises, and in a different way. In my view, one of the core values behind this switch and progressive movement from the so-called Web 2.0 to the so-called Web 3.0 is the switch from again an in-person and maybe physical-based reputation into a reputation that is attached to a digital identity. This is going to be a very interesting phenomenon. Also, maybe for reducing inequalities, because we want to know if the color of the skin may be of a service provider. There are already experiments in place.
Colin, I wanted to turn to you on this because I recall you saying several times when you were interviewed about your work at eBay and devising the ODR platform there, that core part of its success was the engagement of the participants and their willingness to see the platform flourish. And I wonder if you foresee that.
I personally think we're going to see the emergence of many metaverses. And I think the cultures in each one of those metaverses are going to be slightly different. And they're all going to have their own different levels of commitment and connection within those communities.
So are you thinking many types of dispute resolutions as well? Very, very multifaceted?
It's not like we're going to have one metaverse and everybody's going to plug into it, like William Gibson. I think it's going to be a patchwork. And I think each community is going to make their own choices. Again, having worked at eBay and PayPal, which were sort of, I think, one of the pioneers of Web 1, as we say. The next Web 2 was really pioneered, I think, by the social network companies. And I think Web 3, it's still TBD. I mean, if you go back and you look at e-commerce in the early days, there were thousands of e-commerce marketplaces. And what happened was consolidation. And the network effect means that all of the work gets consolidated into big players. I think that's going to put in the hands of the administrators of those metaverses great authority to figure out how are they going to operate. Every society throughout human history has had to have a way to provide fast and fair and consistent, just resolutions to disputes when they arise. And I think that the contours of the society when those systems were created dictated their design. And the legal system is very much based on geography, because the world within which it was created was a geographically proximate world. But that is not the world that we're moving into. Even in international arbitration, we spend a lot of time thinking about, well, what is the site? What's the seat of the arbitration? That is not a meaningful question in this new world. So we're going to have to reinvent these mechanisms. But fundamentally, negotiation, mediation, arbitration, those are timeless. They are parts of the human condition. And we are migrating the human condition into the metaverse, and it is coming along with us. The options that are available for dispute resolution in the metaverse are mind-boggling. So we need to think about how we use that power judiciously so that people don't feel like they're subject to the capricious whims of the administrator. If people are in a metaverse where they feel that the gods are acting capriciously, they will use their power of choice and go to another metaverse.
Is there really that threat about AI on the metaverse, and does it matter, or is there going to be a partnership or AI working alongside humans in the way that many of us have been thinking about in the past few years?
Current state of the tech, I think it would be very, very dangerous potentially to allow AI a full remit to make decisions on its own. And I think, and we've seen events like with Ferdinando Samaria, who is one of the foremost experts on AI and machine learning. He certainly doesn't have high confidence in the ability of AI as it currently stands to make those decisions alone. And the reason, unfortunately, is that you can feed all of the inputs and you can feed a methodology potentially at the start to an AI, but you have no control or no visibility as to what kind of decisions or what are the major factors that they're basing their decision on. And unfortunately, I think for that reason, it would be very hard to instill a lot of confidence in users.
But if you pick up on what Alessandro was saying, where he sees the whole concept of reputational, individual reputation as a decision maker, I mean, how does that, I mean, humans become not irrelevant, but a little bit more secondary?
I mean, we're going to have to create economies of scale. And I think that's where the AI and the machine learning programs do come in, is as a time and an effort saver. And I think that's, unfortunately, I think the at least for now in the current state of the tech, as far as AI can go, I think fundamentally the human element and the human confidence, or at least from the user's point of view, in a human decision maker will remain. And I think for that reason, potentially us as a legal community need to maybe recalibrate what we think is important, and maybe we need to stop thinking about being advocates first and start thinking about maybe being decision makers first in this new metaverse.
What is the role of the legal representative, do you see, in that new environment, if any?
I think it has to be user-led, because crypto natives, they're all about code as law. They don't buy into lawyers and what lawyers say and the charges or the fees that lawyers might charge to resolve their disputes. They want justice now. They want their NFT back, or they want their money back, and they want it in a matter of hours and days. And that's just not, unfortunately, the current level.
And lawyers are there to provide legal advice. And we have a question in the chat who says, well, with Metaverse, is there still a legislative role at all, or is that gone, or what form does it take?
If you front load all of the art and the kind of dispute resolution design, you can really avoid any of this kind of intermediation, this popping up of expert middlemen, and then the users being kind of disenchanted and saying, well, I have no idea, there's no transparency to this system, how could I ever vindicate my own rights? Therefore I need an expert.
What's your take on due process in the metaverse, and does it have a future?
Agree that due process is important, but the question is, like, what do we understand by due process, and what different people understand by due process might be very different, and might be not what lawyers typically understood by due process. The case we typically use to present Kleros and decentralized justice in general, and which takes us into what is due process, is a typical situation of our time. I mean, this woman from France, she hires some guy from any country, Guatemala, Argentina, whatever, and then they make an agreement, and they don't know who they are, because they are just anonymous, and they are pseudonyms into a network. And then there is if there is a dispute, you cannot solve this through international arbitration, right? So the payment is done into a smart contract, and then both parties, by using this app, they basically agree to use Kleros as an arbitration clause. Kleros is going to select a panel of people who are going to analyze this evidence. And these people are anonymous. They don't need to prove their identity, and they don't need to prove they have the skills to resolve the case. And all this is done on a blockchain, which in the case is Ethereum blockchain. And this is very important for due process, as it's typically understood. The fact that Kleros is built on blockchain means that no one can tamper with the evidence of this case, and no one can tamper with the selection process of the jury. Parties can trust the system because they know that the arbitration is going to be carried out exactly as it was coded into the contracts. A very important part of Kleros is that anyone can be an arbitrator in the platform. You just need to buy a token, and this token is like a lottery ticket, which gives you the right to be drawn randomly. Use cases for this, of course, e-commerce, insurance. You can use this in some traditional settings, but what is more interesting is how this is evolving into the metaverse. So the first like massive, metaverse use case we have is like esports. Esports, you have these teams playing in different countries and with avatars. No one knows who these people are, and there is a dispute because one team claims that the other team cheated. I mean, and where are you going to resolve this in the traditional world of arbitration? I mean, the metaverse done by Zuckerberg, which is the metaverse where the platform owner really is God, and there is no due process there. I mean, these systems are centralized, are closed, and they decide and they rule cases as they wish, and they own everything, so they can like basically take or give or take whatever they want. The metaverse we want to win is decentralized metaverse. The other metaverse is like a monarchy. This is more like a republic where there are rules to be followed. We have to start thinking what would be the equivalent of the New York Convention now for the metaverse age. The New York Convention of the 50s was great for a time of international trade, international investment, oil and gas. It's awesome. I know. What does this look like for the 20, 30 years to come in the future?
Thank you for nodding us in the direction of the New York Convention, because that leads us to our next topic, which is enforcement.
The responses in the poll were very, very well informed, and I was glad to see it. And again, we kind of saw a predominance of one major point, and that point really was, obviously it's ideal and it's very efficient to have this on-chain enforcement, but obviously, everyone also recognized that you need effective and diverse off-chain enforcement methods and types for the very reason that obviously we don't live our full lives on-chain. Being able to get to assets that are off-chain is obviously a very, very important thing to be able to do. From my point of view, when looking at on-chain enforcement, we need to all bear in mind the fact that it really requires a private autonomy and a consent element at the start of any of this, because smart contracts and on-chain enforcement are only an execution mechanism. And therefore, it's all well and good to say that, but if we had blockchain arbitration, everything would be very, very smooth. Yes, but you need to get buy-in by the users, by the parties who are going to, if they're going to use an escrow, say again, as in Federico's example, they need to put their money where their mouth is in that dispute, because if they don't, then there could be no on-chain enforcement. Now, obviously, it's very, very easy, as we've said, as the rest of the panelists have said, in a centralized world, because you can bake that into your terms of use. But in a decentralized world, you still need that private autonomy, that consent element. And I think that's a very important point.
I wanted to thank very much my fantastic panel, Sean, Colin, Ale, Federico, for their insight. Thank you.
The Mishcon Academy Digital Sessions. To access advice for businesses that is regularly updated, please visit mishcon.com.